Wild Soul Hopecast, Episode 6, Waiting Without Forcing, WiSH-to-HEAL, Sovereignty in Stillness. Sponsored by Wild Soul Hope and the Hope Method. Hi, Lovey. Welcome back to the Wild Soul Hopecast. If this is your first time here, I'm really glad you found your way in. And if you're returning, thank you for trusting this space again. That matters more than you know. I'm Sharon Lee, and this is a space where we bring clarity to chaos and sovereignty to survival through hope, harness optimal positive energy. And today, we're not pushing, we're not striving, and we're not fixing. We're talking about waiting without forcing, developing a 7-minute practice to create sovereignty and stillness. It's still winter after all, even if the weather is a bit bipolar and can't decide if it's cold or hot. And if that phrase already makes your body tense, that's exactly why you're here. But before we go too much further, let's ground ourselves by taking a breath together. Not a deep performative breath, just a real one. Inhale in, hold 2, 3, 4, exhale out. And let's do a body check-in. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw soften. Notice how quickly your body wants to move on. That's the pattern. Urgency, acceleration. You've been trained to equate movement with safety. But sometimes movement is avoidance. And waiting is not absence. Waiting is alignment without panic. You don't need to prove insight. You don't need to be strong. You don't need to make meaning yet. This is a space where presence matters more than performance. You don't have to agree with everything here, but try and open up to curiosity. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Wisdom works best when it's invited, not forced. Some conversations are meant to be listened to slowly and digested over days. If your body asks for a break, honor that. You can pause, breathe, and return when you're ready. Nothing here requires endurance. So here's what sparked this episode. I had a dream about a book. To be specific, it was a green cloth-bound book with gold block letters. I could not discern the title, but one word stood out. And the word was Arbiter. Not something I've been reading, not something I consciously studied, just Arbiter. So armored with my curiosity, I started searching. I looked up the word first, and it means one who decides, the judge, the authority, and I started feeding my curiosity even more because why would I dream of something I had not been thinking of? Who is arbitering my life? Because if I'm honest, sometimes it's not wisdom. Sometimes it's urgency. In my search, I found 2 books. One from ancient Rome called The Age of Petronius Arbiter by Charles Beck, written in 1856, often published as the satire of Titus Petronius Arbiter, written in 1694. Of course, there are many more, but this is what I initially found. This book has been studied and reimagined several times. So anyways, what I was searching for when I did my search was a green cloth-bound book with gold writing, and this was the title that came up. The second book was a political novel by Henry Cabot Lodge. The Arbiter is the title. Of course, I then found references to the video game Halo that has a character, the Arbiter. My grandsons will be proud of this reference. So this is what I gleaned from this random dream about a green book with a cryptic title. Ancient Rome had a man nicknamed Arbiter of Excellence. He decided what was refined, what was worthy, what was fashionable. Entire rooms shifted around his opinion. Now, fast forward to today. We don't gather in marble halls, we gather on social media. And instead of one arbiter, we have algorithms. We have comment sections. We have trending outrage. And we have urgency as currency. The crowd decides. The one with the most likes wins. The loudest voice wins. The fastest reaction spreads. Different century, same pattern. Excess, performance, speed. But then there's this question. How are we behind compared to who? Waiting without forcing asks, who decided the clock? That question alone can unravel urgency. And what fascinates me is not the drama, it's the nervous system underneath it. Because forcing is not new, it's ancient. Civilizations rise on urgency. They collapse under excess. And here we are again, except now the feast is digital. Henry Cabot Lodge wrote The Arbiter as a political novel exploring power, governance, social tension, and the moral weight of leadership during a rapidly changing America. While the novel is very much a product of its 19th century worldview, its discussions around expansion, indigenous peoples, and the justification of political authority feels strikingly relevant to today. It reflects a time when the nation was grappling with identity, land, sovereignty, and who had the right to determine the future of others, themes that continue to echo in modern discourse. What stands out is not simply the historical content, but the tension between authority and conscience. The novel wrestles with who gets to arbitrate truth, whose voices are centered, and how national narratives are shaped. In many ways, our current moment mirrors that same friction. Debates over land, rights, representation, and the historical reckoning continuing to surface. Perhaps what we need today is not arbiters in the same sense of singular power brokers deciding outcomes, but more individuals willing to step into the role of bridge builders, people who can hold complexity, listen across divides, and weigh justice with humility. In that sense, the idea of the arbiter becomes less about control and more about discernment, less about dominance and more about moral steadiness, because discernment, much like unconditional love, requires regulation, courage, and the willingness to see clearly without forcing. Let's talk physiology. This topic is well studied and often written about, and it concerns how your nervous system does not like uncertainty. Uncertainty equals vulnerability, and vulnerability equals potential danger. So your body produces adrenaline, cortisol rises, your thinking narrows, you feel compelled to act, but adrenaline is not intuitive. Adrenaline is activation. Activation is not alignment. No. When you force outcomes, we are often trying to escape the discomfort of not knowing, not because we're guided, but because we are uncomfortable. And here's the truth. You cannot access unconditional love while your nervous system is bracing. Can I say that again for you? The truth is, you cannot access unconditional love of yourself while your nervous system is bracing. Unconditional love requires regulation. Sovereignty requires regulation. Waiting without forcing is not passive. It is regulated restraint. And restraint in a dysregulated culture is radical. Let's get really honest. Most forcing doesn't look aggressive. It looks like texting again, explaining more, deciding quickly, posting fast, clarifying immediately, pushing the outcome just a little, giving your opinion one more time, maybe it'll make sense to them. But biologically, forcing is often fear trying to feel safe. Your nervous system hates uncertainty. Uncertainty feels like vulnerability. Vulnerability feels like danger. So adrenaline rises, and adrenaline feels productive. Yeah, it feels like doing something. But adrenaline is not intuition. Adrenaline is activation. And activation is not alignment. Waiting without forcing means learning to sit instead of activation without obeying it. That is maturity. That is sovereignty. That was a little repetitive, but let's go deeper. Why does waiting feel personal? Why does waiting feel like abandonment? Because somewhere in your history, waiting meant being left. Waiting meant not being chosen. Waiting meant not being prioritized. Waiting meant not being safe. So now, when something doesn't move fast enough, ego steps in. Ego says, push, secure it, text again, lock it down, decide now, force clarity, don't lose this. Not because you're controlling, but because you're protecting. But protection and alignment are not the same thing. Waiting without forcing is saying, I understand the fear, but we are not in danger. That sentence alone can change your life because the ego fears irrelevance. The soul understands timing. Waiting without forcing is ego integration. It is saying, I understand your fear, but we are not in danger. And it says that over and over again. That is inner leadership. That is emotional intelligence. You know, I got to doing more research, and this is where I realized something. 1967 was an interesting year, not just because of aliens. Come on, we can all admit it was a great curiosity. And not because of secrets, but because it was a hinge year. War was escalating, authority was tightening, governments were posturing strength, and at the exact same time, I'm telling you, parks were filling with people asking for peace. Music was rising. Mysticism was entering the mainstream. Young people were questioning everything. The summer of love wasn't just flower, crowns, and guitars. It was a nervous system response. It was humanity saying, there has to be another way. And I really think that's how this year is going. There has to be another way. And doesn't it feel familiar? Not political, not dramatically, just energetically. Whenever systems feel rigid, the human heart searches for softness. Whenever fear dominates headlines, the body begins craving regulation. Whenever authority tightens, consciousness expands somewhere else. That's not rebellion. That's balance. History moves in contradictions and expansions. And I sometimes wonder, what if we're not in chaos right now? What if we're in contraction before expansion? Because beneath the noise, beneath the division, beneath the scrolling and the arguing and the urgency, there is a quieter undercurrent, a longing for unconditional love, a longing for sovereignty, a longing for clarity over chaos. And that longing is not loud. It's mystical. It's subtle. It's happening in therapy rooms, in podcasts, in quiet morning walks, in people choosing boundaries, in people learning how to regulate instead of react. Revolutions don't always start in streets. Sometimes they start in regulated bodies. Sometimes they start when individuals decide, I will not force, I will not panic, I will not perpetuate violence in my own nervous system. That's the mystical revolution. Not performative positivity, not bypassing reality, but embodied love. And here's what history teaches us. Every era of unrest births a deeper longing for love. And love, when embodied, is the most disruptive force of all. Because it doesn't scream, it steadies. It doesn't demand, it illuminates. And when enough people choose that, something shifts. But here's the truth no one wants to talk about. Before illumination, there is always a dark night. You know, there's this quote I heard on a late night of insomnia that has resonated with me for a while now. The dark night of the soul calls forth the light within. The light of truth comes forth. The blind shall see once again. There's an undercurrent there, an illumination, and I find it intriguing. But I've also been sitting with that for a bit now, because I don't think the dark night is about some dramatic collapse of the world, though it very well could be. But I think it's about the collapse of illusion. And here's what's interesting. When documents get disclosed, when stories surface, when narratives shift, we act shocked. But if we're really honest, most of the time, we already felt the truth. We sensed something. We knew something was off. It's the same reasoning we apply to our food consumption. We know it's mostly poison, but we convince ourselves that the individual they is protecting us from complete annihilation. So we just keep consuming despite how we feel. We just don't want to destabilize our own comfort by admitting it. That's not stupidity. That's protection. The nervous system will only let you consciously hold what you are resourced enough to handle. So when truth feels overwhelming, destabilizing, or identity shattering, we mythologize it. We minimize it. We turn it into just a story. We say, that can't be real. Or we choose to stay in our lane. Because if humans are capable of extraordinary deception, then humans are also capable of extraordinary power. And if they are capable, so might we be. And that responsibility, that awareness, that's heavy. So sometimes blindness isn't ignorance. It's self-preservation. The dark night of the soul isn't about discovering something new. It's about no longer pretending we didn't know. And that applies everywhere. In governments, in institutions, in relationships, in family dynamics, in your own shadow. We all participate in silence when truth feels too destabilizing to hold. But here's where it matters. Waiting without forcing is not passive. It is regulated perception. We think if we chase truth aggressively, we enter bully ego. And we say to ourselves, I must expose everything. I must control the narrative. if we collapse into the fear, we enter into victim ego. They're hiding something. I'm powerless. I can't help with anything. But sovereignty witnesses. Sovereignty regulates. Sovereignty waits. Sovereignty observes without forcing. And from that place, truth rises naturally. Because truth does not need to be hunted. Illusion collapses under its own weight. The dark night strips away distraction. It removes coping strategies. It dismantles performance positivity. It leaves you sitting in the dark with yourself. In the dark with yourself, for Pete's sakes. And in that stillness, the light doesn't come from outside. It rises from within you. That's the part that people are missing. The blind shall see again. Doesn't mean someone hands you secret information. The blind shall see again is a statement that doesn't mean someone hands you secret information. It means your nervous system becomes calm enough to perceive clearly. It means you stop projecting, you stop panicking, you stop forcing outcomes, and you become still enough to see. And when you see clearly, you don't react, you respond. You don't spiral, you integrate. You don't chase truth, you embody it. And that is waiting without forcing. It's trusting that what needs to be revealed will surface inside you, around you, through you, not through aggression, not through fear, not through obsession, but through regulated presence. The dark night isn't the end of light. It's the moment you realize the light was never outside of you to begin with. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. So let's gently bring it down. Because it's easy to talk about truth out there. It's easy to talk about institutions, narratives, collective blindness. But waiting without forcing isn't about mastering the world. It's about mastering your own nervous system. If it's true that we've collectively turned a blind eye at times, where are you turning a blind eye personally? Where are you pretending you don't know what you know? In a relationship, in a boundary, in your body, in your calling. Sometimes the dark night doesn't expose governments. It exposes you. And that's not shame. That's sovereignty. Because here's what happens in the body. When your nervous system is dysregulated, everything feels urgent. You need clarity right now. You need answers yesterday. You need resolution now. You feel like if you don't force something to move, you'll drown in uncertainty. And that urgency is often unprocessed fear. That panic is often trauma memory. And when we don't regulate, we either become the bully ego, trying to force truth into the light, or the victim ego, convincing truth is being withheld from us. But sovereignty witnesses, sovereignty breathes, sovereignty pauses long enough to let the nervous system settle. And from that place, you can see clearly without spiraling. You can wait without collapsing. You can hold truth without forcing it. That is power, not loud power, not reactive power, regulated power. And this is where waiting without forcing becomes a spiritual discipline. It means becoming so steady within yourself that you are no longer manipulated by urgency. You don't chase revelation. You become the space where revelation happens. You don't demand clarity. You create enough calm for clarity to rise. And here's the part I love the most. Your body is safe. Your perception sharpens. Your cortisol lowers. Discernment increases. When you stop forcing, truth surfaces. Not because you hunted it, but because illusion cannot survive stillness. So, if the blind are meant to see again, it begins right here with you, with breath, with regulation, with the courage to admit what you already know and the patience to let it unfold. So then you ask yourself, how do we do this in real life? Not in theory, not in body, because you cannot wait without forcing if your nervous system is bracing. So let's regulate with a simple breath practice you can do anywhere. Place a hand on your heart or chest and one on your abdomen. You should feel your heart rhythm on one hand and your breath rhythm on the other. Inhale through the nose for 6 counts and hold your breath for 4 counts. Exhale through the mouth for 8 counts. Let's practice together. Inhale in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Notice the part of you that wants to rush even this. Smile at it. That's the pattern. We're not fighting it. We're just not obeying it. Insight does not rewire the body. Experience does. So now we move from understanding to embodiment. This is where the WiSH-to-HEAL practice I created comes in. Not as a framework to memorize, but as a rhythm to regulate. WiSH-to-HEAL is not about fixing. It's about creating the conditions where forcing dissolves. We move slowly. You are not rushing through letters. You are inhabiting them. This is a daily or as needed 7-minute practice that realigns your energy. Of course, you can take longer if you like, but I wanted this practice to be something you couldn't find excuses to get out of. Intentional ways to set yourself up for success. The WiSH-to-HEAL practice teaches you to meet stress differently, and in doing so, it gives you back your freedom. The acronym of WiSH-to-HEAL means wisdom, serenity, heart, healing, expression, acceptance, and love. Wisdom, I connect. The practice is I journal it, and you pause for 2 minutes to write down what you're feeling. Letting it out of your head and onto paper clears space for calm and clarity. Serenity stands for I see. The practice is meditate on it. Close your eyes, breathe deeply through your nose and out through your mouth for a count of 3 to 8 slow breaths. Even 30 seconds of stillness resets your stress response. Heart stands for I love. The practice is feel it. Place your hand over your heart and name the emotion you're carrying. Acknowledging it releases the grip of denial. Healing stands for I act. The practice is account for it. Whisper to yourself, this is mine, but it does not define me. Sometimes snapping your fingers after you speak the words helps reset your mindset. Healing begins with accountability, choosing to own your story instead of letting stress own you. Expression stands for I speak. The practice is breathe it out. Inhale deeply and sigh it out. Exhale through sound, movement, or even a gentle shake of your shoulders. Releases the body's natural reset. Acceptance stands for I feel. The practice is walk with it. Take a short, mindful walk. Let your steps match your breath. Acceptance is movement with gentleness, not stagnation. Love stands for I am. The practice, hope it. Repeat a love-based mantra. I choose love over fear. Hope begins with me. Or my newest favorite, I am one. I am sovereign. I am loved unconditionally. This is where you harness optimal positive energy, turning stress into strength, fear into faith, and heaviness into healing. Love is the energy that makes hope more than an idea. It is a way of life. Now let's take an extra moment and reflect and notice. What am I trying to rush? What fear lives underneath? Where have I confused urgency with intuition? What would self-love waiting look like? Who is arbitrating my time? Fear or wisdom? You can turn these into journal questions if you'd like. They make for great memory dumps. I created this practice because we live in a world addicted to acceleration. Outrage spreads faster than clarity. Certainty spreads faster than nuance. Waiting without forcing is rebellion against that speed. It is choosing regulation over reaction, discernment over impulse, integrity over immediacy. The regulated person cannot be manipulated as easily. Calm is disruptive. Sovereignty is quiet and perfectly imperfect. I want to take a minute and circle back. By now, you should have learned a little about me and that I love to look at what once was and try and glean a lesson or two. Remember how we talked about how ancient Rome had its arbiters? When you take a minute, you can see how we have ours. Back then, it was courts and councils. Now it's feeds and followers. But the deeper question hasn't changed. Who decides your worth? Who decides your timing? Who decides your pace? If it's fear, you will force. If it's culture, you will hurry. If it's ego, you will secure. If it's wisdom, you will wait. And waiting, my love, is not weakness. It is regulated sovereignty. As we close today, we've talked about cultural unrest. We've talked about mystical revolutions. We've talked about the dark night of the soul. We've even talked about seeing clearly, about waiting without forcing. But here's the deeper question. What are you actually waiting for? Most of us are not waiting for answers. We're waiting for peace. We're waiting for safety. We're waiting for love that doesn't exhaust us. Love that doesn't make us perform. Love that doesn't make us chase. Love that doesn't make us shrink. We're waiting for love that feels like home. And next week in episode 7, that's where we're going. Because unconditional love isn't chaos. It isn't adrenaline. It isn't obsession. It isn't intensity mistaken for connection. Real love regulates. Real love steadies. Real love expands your nervous system instead of overwhelming it. Love that feels like home doesn't activate your survival patterns. It softens them. And after everything we've unpacked in this series, the trauma, the ego, the burnout, the waiting without forcing, episode 7 is about embodiment. It's about recognizing the difference between chemistry and safety, between attachment and alignment, between intensity and intimacy. Because once you understand your nervous system, once you see clearly, once you stop forcing, you stop mistaking chaos for connection, and you start choosing love that feels like home. And when love feels like home, you don't have to chase it, you recognize it. Waiting without forcing does not mean doing nothing. You still live, you still love, you still build, but you stop chasing what would require self-betrayal. You regulate, you align, you remain, and what is meant for you will not require panic to receive it. Sometimes all you have left is hope, and sometimes hope is enough. Talk soon.